Hello, I am going to tell you about my personal experience that I had when I was pregnant and then I had a miscarriage at 9 weeks. I'm telling you this because if you're experiencing a miscarriage, I don't want you to feel like you're alone, that you're by yourself, or these thoughts that you're having that you had up to the miscarriage or during your miscarriage, that they're weird or abnormal. I'm going to tell you what happened to me, and some things may be the same, some things may seem completely crazy, but I just want to share my story with you, and if there's any way that this can help you with what you are going through, that's all I can ask for. So to begin, it was Thanksgiving of 2020, and my husband was home for the weekend from work, and apparently I was extremely moody, and I didn't really realize that. And he was kind of joking with me. He's like, "Are you pregnant?" And I was like, "No," because I wasn't supposed to have my period until that Monday. So that Saturday, I took a test, and it came back negative. And I was like, there you have it, not pregnant. And then that Sunday night, I went to bed, and I just had the worst cramps in years. And I go, well, that settles it. I just took a pregnancy test the day before. I'm obviously having premenstrual cramps, and it's as it is. So I went and I took some medicine, and I was able to finally get some pain relief, and I went to bed. And on Monday, I was out shopping, but I still hadn't started my period. So just as a precautionary, I bought a couple pregnancy tests. I realized I always buy 2 tests if I'm going to test, just in case something happens to the first one. I don't have to immediately run back out to the store to get a second one. And I took one that afternoon, and I just kind of sat and watched the line go, and the positive was very, very faint. And I'm like, no way. Is this really happening? I just had a negative test a couple days before. I just had super bad cramps the day before, and now it's showing I'm pregnant. So I took a picture of it, and I sent it to my husband because he was back at work, and he goes, I told you. And all I could think was, I'm going to have 2 kids under 2 there for a while. I'm definitely not going to get any sleep here. And just to confirm it, the next morning, Tuesday morning, I took another one, and that one instantly lit up. I'm like, okay, I'm pregnant. So I called my doctor, my OBGYN, and we scheduled the ultrasound at 8 weeks. It would be December 29th. And this was December 1st. So it was a long ways away. And for some reason, and my husband was just ready to tell everyone. He was super excited, and we thought, well, maybe for our families, we will tell them as a Christmas gift. We'll do something fun. Whether we take a picture and frame it and give it to our parents and see if they notice that the baby is wearing a big sister shirt, something like that. Or we had several ideas, but we're like, we'll wait till Christmas. And but even then, I didn't want to tell people. I wanted to wait until that first appointment. Even though Christmas is the 25th, the appointment was on the 29th. I just had that feeling, I just don't want to tell anyone. And the coming weeks, I had morning sickness, which I expected with my first pregnancy. That first month, I had morning sickness 24/7. But this time around, I just had periods of morning sickness. And it always seemed to hit when I was at work. I teach twice a week at a small private school. I teach music class, and they're preparing their Christmas program. And I always had morning sickness right when I went to school. And it got to the point that my morning sickness was getting harder to cover up. So we decided to tell our families early just because it was exciting, but at the same time, I didn't want to keep making up excuses why I didn't feel well. I just wanted to be upfront with them. So we ended up FaceTiming our families like at 8:30, 9 o'clock one evening to tell our families. And they were really excited. But at the same time, again, I didn't want to tell anyone else other than the immediate families because I just wanted to wait till that first appointment. It was December 29th came around, and it was a 8 o'clock appointment. It was one of the very first ones. And I just remember being so nervous. We were brought back there, and they started the ultrasound, and right away they found the baby. And I was like, I really am pregnant. And then I noticed the baby seemed smaller than normal. But again, it had been a year and a half since I had had an ultrasound, and since the first ultrasound that I ever had, and I didn't really remember how big the baby was supposed to be on the screen. And then she said she was having a hard time getting the heartbeat, so she was going to have to do a transvaginal ultrasound, which I thought was a little unusual because I didn't have to have any my first time. So she did that, and she finally got a heartbeat, and the heartbeat was 54. And I knew as soon as I saw that number, I was like, this isn't good. It's not good. So after that, she got all the measurements she needed, and she asked if I was sure of my dates. And if there was one thing I'm sure of, I know exactly my dates. I know exactly when I'm supposed to start, when I end, when I'm ovulating. I know all of that. So I was 100% sure of my dates. And she goes, well, the doctor isn't in yet. Do you want to stick around, or do you want to have her call you? And I go, we will hang around town because it's a 40-minute drive home. I go, we'll hang around town, we'll get some breakfast, and she can just call us in case she wants us to come back in. So about 45 minutes later, the doctor calls, and again, she goes, are you sure about your dates? Are you sure? I'm like, I'm positive. She goes, well, the baby's measuring at 6 weeks, and it's supposed to be 8 weeks, and the baby's heart rate is at 54. And they said, we think you're in the beginning steps of having a miscarriage. And she asked if I had had any bleeding, any spotting, any cramping, anything like that. And I said, no, none. She goes, okay, we want to schedule you for a follow-up ultrasound in a week. So we did that, and just sitting in the car and started crying. You know, like, what are you supposed to do in that situation? So we told our immediate family what was going on, just so they knew, but we didn't want anyone else to know. We went in, so that was a Tuesday, and we went in the following Monday. And again, she was having trouble finding the heartbeat, so she did the transvaginal. This time, you could just see it in her face, in her eyes, and I just knew there was no heartbeat. So they went and got our doctor, and he was in, because the first time we saw another doctor who was in the office, but my main OBGYN, he wasn't in, so I saw my main one that day, and he let me know what my options are. He goes, you can do this naturally, or we can give you some medicine to help start it, or if you just want to schedule the DNC now, we can do that. And this was Monday, and he goes, I could get you in by Friday if you want to do that. He goes, you can talk it over with your husband, give us a call back if you want to schedule that, just let us know. So we left, and of course, my husband and I were both upset. And we talked, no, this is it. So thankfully that night I was already wearing a pad because I was expecting to start my miscarriage at any time, so I had that on, and then thankfully also I was wearing pants, so it caught everything. So I got into the bathroom, and I look in my underwear, and there is just this mass this jelly mass in my underwear. I'd say it was at least the size of like a pear, and it just kind of like mushed out. And I just thought, is that the baby? Is my baby there? But at the same time, I didn't want to look. And then with that, I was sitting on the toilet and I'm just bleeding profusely. It finally stopped after about 5 minutes. I got myself all cleaned up, got some new pajamas on, and for some reason I was like, I'll just go back to bed. I got upstairs and I was crawling into bed and I felt another gush with more stuff coming out. And so I kind of like hit my husband like, hey, you gotta get up. So I hit him and I said, gotta get up. I'm bleeding. I'm having my miscarriage right now. So I went downstairs and basically for the next 45 minutes, I sat on the toilet. It sounded like I was urinating, but it was just blood. It was just blood pouring out. And I would have like a cramping feeling, and if I like kind of pushed down a little bit, it like tissue would come out. It just clots and clots. And it would stop every now and then, and I'd put a pad on and I'd stand up and immediately it would fill it. And after the 4th or 5th time of doing that, that's when I just finally sat on the toilet. And my husband goes, I'm giving you an hour. If you don't stop bleeding by 4 a.m., we'll go to the ER. And for some reason, right at 4 a.m., I stopped bleeding. I'm like, well, we'll take that as a sign. That's good. And got myself all cleaned up, had a little snack, went back to bed. That was fine. And then it was just, I had light spotting for the next couple of days. And then on that Monday, so it'd been 5 days, it started picking up again. I started bleeding heavier. And I was getting concerned about it. So I called my doctor and they said, if it goes on, if it picks up that you're bleeding more, heavier, and I haven't stopped in 24 hours, then call us and we'll schedule an appointment. So I was like, okay. And that night, went to bed. It had died down, so it was just light again. And I went to bed and I was good. And then that Tuesday morning, my husband left for work, and I was laying in bed. I had these awful cramps. And I'm thinking, oh, am I starting my first cycle? Or is there more to this miscarriage? What's going on? And I tried to fight it off for about an hour. And it wasn't going away. So I finally got myself up and got downstairs to take some medicine. And I sat down in the chair with the heating pad on. And all of a sudden, I felt like I was in labor. And I said, this isn't good at all. So I called my mom, and she agreed it wasn't a good thing. And she goes, well, can you, drive over to the house, to her house? And I was like, nope. Like, I'm in labor. I can't do that at all. So she goes, okay, I'm getting dressed right now. I'll be there. It's about a half-hour drive to my house. So she's going to be there a half hour. She goes, call your doctor, see what they want you to do. So as soon as I hung up with the phone with her, the first thing I did, which was probably the smartest thing I did, was I went and unlocked the door so that way she could get in the house. And then I went to get up and get my baby. And so I brought her downstairs and I started breastfeeding her because I figured, well, I'm probably going to have to go to the doctor here, or at least we're going to my parents' house. I need to feed her. So while I'm feeding her, I called the doctor and they're asking me all these things, and they can just tell, like, I'm in so much pain that I can barely breathe. Like, it hurt to breathe. I mean, I was in labor, and I really didn't know how bad that was going to feel, because when I had my first baby, I had an epidural. I didn't feel all of that. So this was new, and I did not like it at all. And she goes, well, you need to go to the ER because we can't get you until 3 p.m. This is, 8 o'clock in the morning, and you need something for pain. So I said, okay. And they go, are you bleeding? Are you having heavy bleeding? And right as she said that, a gush, I could feel a gush come out. And I said, yep, I'm bleeding. So she goes, yep, go to the ER. They'll take care of you. Got it. So hung up the phone, and again, I felt another gush, and I kind of like, thankfully my baby had already detached from me, and I kind of like, not really tossed her on the floor, but I set her down in a haste, and then I ran to the bathroom, and there was just a trail of blood. And again, there's just this clumps of tissue in my underwear, and I'm sitting on the toilet, and it's just pouring out of me again. So I'm sitting there, and then I can hear my baby coming. I'm like, oh no, there's a trail of blood. My baby's going to about ready to play in some blood. So it stopped for a few seconds. It eased up enough that I went and I grabbed my baby and I put a towel in the bathtub so she wouldn't get wet from the morning shower. I put her in there with some bath toys. That way she just stayed out of the mess. And I remember her looking over the tub and going, uh-oh. I'm like, yeah, uh-oh, Mama made a mess. So my mom gets there, and there's just blood everywhere, and she was able to get the baby in the car, and we got clothes for me to put on that were semi-clean, and it's a 40-minute drive to the hospital. So, I mean, we're just gunning it. She right before she left, she called our pastor and said, hey, Renee's bleeding severely. We have to take her to the ER. Please pray for safety there. And as we're driving to the hospital, I'm like sitting back because I'm having my labor pains. And even though I had a pad on and I had pants on, I can just see the blood pulsating out. Just pulsating out. I'm like, I might die on the way to the hospital. And we did debate on calling an ambulance. But then we're like, well, they have to get everyone, and where do we meet up, and this, and that. But we did call the hospital on the way there saying, hey, my daughter is hemorrhaging. She's going to need immediate help as soon as we get there. So we get there, thank goodness, safely. And this will forever drive me insane. But I get into the ER, and they make me check in. They make me sign my name, give my driver's license, my insurance, and I mean, I am just gushing out blood. I'm like, can you not see that I'm dying here? Really? So we do that. So we do the 2-3 minutes of check-in, and they take me immediately back to get my vitals, and I'm taking off my sweatshirt so they can do my blood pressure. And thankfully, I don't know who the other person was, but then there's the main nurse, and she sees me. You know what? We're taking her immediately back to her room. I'm like, thank you. Finally someone here. So we get back to the room. They help me get out of my nastiness of clothes and into a slightly fresh gown. And as I'm doing this, I'm just pouring out blood and tissue again. And she calls for the doctor immediately to come in there. And they were trying to set up an IV, but I had lost so much blood they couldn't get an IV in right away because they wanted to get fluids in me. And so they just, again, I started gushing out blood, and they go, we got to get you cleaned up, we got to make this stop. And so they just immediately, they laid me back and they started doing suctioning on me. And that was really hard because that's when I knew for sure the baby wasn't going to be there anymore. If I hadn't lost it within the prior week, it definitely is going to be gone now. That was really hard. And so I started crying. And I had the nurse, and she grabbed my hand, and she goes, just squeeze and let it out. She's like, just let it out. So they do that. They get me cleaned up, and the nurse, she was so good. And she cleans me all up, gets all the blood wiped off all of me from everywhere. And then they're like, okay, we're scheduling an ultrasound. And for some reason, the ultrasound took forever and a day for them to get me in. And so just waiting there. And again, within 45 minutes, I started gushing out again, blood and tissue. And I called my little help button, and they came right back in. And they had to do the suctioning all over. And the doctor's like, okay, we're right where we started an hour ago. Okay, And in that time, they had, finally got my IV going. They did lots and lots of blood work on me. And I finally go back to get my ultrasound. And that was just horrendous. That was a horrible, horrible ultrasound. Not just because I had an ultrasound, but because they did it normally, and then they wanted to do it transvaginally, but you had to pee. And so they made me walk to the bathroom, which was not ideal, because again, I started just bleeding everywhere. And then I don't know what her deal was, but she was just like jabbing that thing, this, and there, and it just hurt so bad. And I remember I passed another glob of tissue that just laid there, and she was just looking at it like she had not experienced that before. I can tell you that. So they get me back to the ER after that. They get me cleaned up once again, and they gave me some medicine to help with the lining and to get everything out. And then I asked, can I have something for pain? Because I've been having, labor pains on and off. Thankfully, I'd eased up some, but I was just in terrible, terrible pain. So she's like, absolutely. So she called the doctor, and the doctor ordered me some pain meds. But they had given me all this medicine, and I forgot what they had given me, but she goes, it's going to make you feel like you're floating. And I surely did. And right after that, she gave me the pain medicine. She goes, this should kick in right away. So she left the room. She gave me her call button. She goes, let me know if you need anything. And I went to call either my husband or my mom, because no one else was allowed in. I was going to give them a call to let them know what was going on. And right as I went to do that, I felt myself start passing out. So I call the help person, and she goes, are you laying down? And I'm like, yes, I'm laying down. I'm not allowed to move. I'm bleeding everywhere. And right as my nurse came back in, everything just was blacking out. And I remember her saying, what's going on? And all I could get was ugh. And so I remember her laying me down, and then I blacked out. I mean, I've had hypoglycemic spells where I've blacked out, and it's usually just I'm out and then I'm back in and we're good. This one, I was out. My sight was gone. My hearing was gone. All my senses were gone, and I was just like, I'm dying. Like, this is it. Like, I'm legitimately going to die right here, right now. But at the same time, I wasn't scared. I knew I would be on my way to heaven. I felt bad that I wouldn't be able to say goodbye to my husband and baby, but at the same time, I finally wasn't in pain. I finally was just, everything was good in the world for that time. Just all the hustle and bustle that was going around me was gone. I didn't have to see anything. My pain was finally gone. And then my hearing started coming back. And the first thing I remember them saying was, her heart rate's 24. And I was like, yep, I'm dying. What can you do? And then I went out again. And then I remember coming back, and my doctor was like face to face with me. He didn't say much. He just stared at me, and then I went back under. And I really don't know how long I was out total. I never asked, but I know it was 5-10 minutes that I was out of it. And when I came back into reality, my nurse was right there. She was so good. And she goes, all right. She goes, welcome back. She goes, I provide miracles. I'm like, thank you. So I had glanced up at my monitor to see what it was, like what my heart rate was and things like that, because I remember them telling me that it was 24. And I saw that my blood pressure had dropped. It was like 64/32. So when they gave me the medicine, it made my blood pressure drop, and then it dropped my heart rate as well. For someone who hadn't experienced as much blood loss as me, I'm sure they would have been fine, but because of my situation, that's what caused it. And then after that, they're like, you needed to be admitted to the hospital. And I was like, oh, great. Not going home. So I was admitted to the hospital, and I had to call my family to let them know that I wasn't going to be coming home. And thankfully, my husband had already gone home to get some clothes and phone charger just in case that was going to happen. And right when they were taking me up to the room again, I had another gush of blood and tissue, and I just remember thinking, this is not going to stop. I'm just going to bleed out all night. But thankfully, that was the last time. I had to stay the night. It was not fun, just because I couldn't sleep. It's just so hard. I had an IV coming out of both arms, and just my monitor's beeping, and they had to check on me so often because I had been so sick. Rightfully so. I just didn't sleep. And I remember I got to go home very early the next morning. Well, they started the process very early, but I didn't get to check out till about noon or something like that. I just remember feeling so lousy, and I knew my iron was low. I've had issues with it in the past, and I knew with all the blood that I had lost it for sure, that it had been low. So I kept asking throughout the night, are you going to redo my hemoglobin? Are you going to? And they're like, no, the doctor isn't going to reorder it, which I found weird, but I should have pushed for it more, but I didn't. And went home, and the next day I went to my parents' house just so they could kind of watch the baby, and then I could relax. And I was just pale. I mean, you can already see that I'm fair skinned, but I was just white. I had zero lips, and they went for blood work, and my hemoglobin was like 8.2. And so I knew it had been lower because it had been 48 hours since I had been tested last. So I don't even know how low it went. I just know it was low. So from there, I had to go back every single week to get my until my hemoglobin was up. And I had to take iron pills 3 times a day. And it was about a week later, after being out of the hospital, that I thought my baby was sick because she was so cranky. So I took her temperature, and she was fine. And I go, well, is she fine? So I took my temperature as just a base, and it said that I had a temperature of 102. I said, oh, great. Didn't even know I was sick. Now, this whole time I had a headache. I mean, I had gotten a headache in the hospital, and I don't know if it was because of all the blood loss, or if it was because of the medications I was on, or, just what exactly happened. But I had a constant pounding headache, and it would lighten up for a little bit, but then it would come back full force, like almost a migraine force, but then it would go a bit. So that day that I had a temperature of 102, I was like, well, I didn't know I was sick just because I had had a headache for a week now. And so then I was taking medicine, and I was rotating Tylenol and ibuprofen, and I kept rotating it. And 24 hours later, I was still having a temperature of 102. I couldn't get it down at all. And I was afraid that I had an infection. So I called my OBGYN, and I told them what was going on. And they're like, I hate to tell you this. It was like 4:30 in the afternoon. They go, we need to send you to the ER. So I went back to the ER. And of course, when you get there, my temperature was fine. My blood pressure was fine. They did blood work. That came back fine. They did a pelvic on me. That was fine. But I was so sick. So, or at least, my head hurt so bad. And they sent me home, thankfully. The good thing from that is I didn't have to be admitted. As soon as I got home, I took my temperature, and it said 102. So I don't know if it's because I was doing mine through the ear, and like my brain was frying or something like that. And they did mine orally. I don't know, but I just remember I was like, well, I'm still in the same boat. But yeah, I had to, on top of when they did my blood work, they're testing my HCG levels because they wanted to get back down to 0. And I had to go in for about every week for 6 weeks until that was down. And I'm so happy I don't have to get pooped anymore. So happy. But yeah, that's my experience. It's not a good one. And looking back, if I would have, hindsight is 2020, I would have done the DNC right away. Because I would not wish wish what happened to me on anyone. And for me, recovery-wise, you know, handling this, grieving this, overall, right away when I found out that I had officially miscarried, I had texted my boss to say, hey, can you tell my fellow coworkers, you know, my fellow teachers what's going on, because I didn't want them to be out of the loop in case I had to miss school. I wanted them to know. And then I waited a couple days, that way we could tell family, and then I put it on Facebook. And I did that not because I wanted attention or I just needed sympathy or anything like that. I just wanted people to know why I was feeling, if they saw me and I looked sad, or if I just started crying or something, they didn't have to ask what was wrong. They knew, and they would just leave me alone. And that's what happened, and that really helped me, because I didn't have to keep reopening that band-aid, putting in those, just reopening that wound. And with that, I had so many people, either, members of the church, friends, reach out to me, tell me about when they had their miscarriage, that they had experienced one, that they had one, maybe two, what helped them when in their grieving process. Both my husband and I, we firmly believe that we were having another daughter. And for me, how I've coped through this is I've had to stay busy. I made an extremely detailed list of everything I would like to clean or fix in the house. And that is something like a checklist, a daily, weekly, and monthly checklist, and I work on that. But for me, I have to stay busy. I've had a few days where I've cried, but in the beginning, like when I first found out that I was having a miscarriage, to the point where I was actually miscarrying, once I actually started to have the miscarry and I was in the hospital, my brain would not let me grieve. Like after I was admitted into the hospital, my body was so focused on, you need to heal yourself, that I couldn't even think of, like, it wouldn't even let me have the thought of, you just lost a baby. It said, you're sick, you need to rest. If you're not going to rest, you need to keep your mind busy by doing this. And that's what I did. And a lot of people still are concerned about me because I don't talk about it. But at the same time, I'm not one just to bring it up. And that is one of the reasons why, is because sometimes my brain just doesn't let me think about it, whether that's healthy or not, I don't know. I've dealt with depression in the past, and I don't want to get back to that part. I worked really hard over the years to really improve myself so I don't have to take medications, and I think I'm doing good. By me telling you this, it's very therapeutic. And if there is something that helped you, if you had gone through a miscarriage and there was something that helped you in the grieving process, in the coping process, in everything that you experience, let me know. Comment down below, and not only would it help me, but it may potentially help others if they're watching this video because they just found out that they're going to be going through a miscarriage. Just because I don't tell people personally, like I don't talk to people personally about what's going on, doesn't mean that every day I'm having a conversation in my head over and over and over again of what happened. Like, I play through of what happened when I woke up with cramping to when my mom got here. Like, what could I have done differently? How could I have improved that situation? And then when I was at the hospital, like what, how could of things gone better? I'm so grateful that I'm still alive. I'm able to, see my husband and baby, and I have them in my life. And, I'm very thankful